Okay, three, two. Yes, we can begin.
Hello and welcome everyone to episode number 70 of the Indie Football Podcast. I have, as every one of you must know, some of our regular listeners, I keep flaunting about how I've done various projects in my master's in sports management, and one of them was with the sporting news. And I'm glad to announce that today we have finally got someone from the sporting news, their content in soccer, their football soccer head, Kyle Bonn. Hello, Kyle. How are you doing tonight?
Doing well, thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm excited to do a little chat here.
Yeah, Anukar sir, being like we are close to 2 years, this podcast it's a special journey, but it's even more special when we have got people from world's oldest sporting publication, right? He's a
That's
legend.
right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Kyle. I think it's like a pre-anniversary gift from Dwaipayan to me because trust me, for the last 2, 3 weeks, all he has been doing is talking about TSN and how amazing of a work you guys have been doing. And honestly, you guys have a fan here too because it's. I was reading about how you guys started and the history, and I mean of course, you guys have had associations with ESPN also, and I really appreciate the work you guys have done all over the years. And of course, when it comes to you, it was I really liked how you were so active, interacting on the group because we have done 70 episodes so far, and we have had guests of all types. And some of them are a bit reserved, some of them are very, playful and all. So it was great to have someone as humble as you when you're at the top. So, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Indie Football Podcast. We welcome TSN and its soccer head here to India to the Indian football market, and we are hoping for a good collaboration here.
Thank you. Yes, that's very kind of you to say. We're happy to be part of the football community. We're expanding, continuing to expand our football coverage. Obviously, Premier League is a big part of what we do, but it goes beyond that. I personally, based in the United States, cover a lot of Major League Soccer, a lot of the U.S. national team. Obviously, with the Copa America next year and the World Cup in 2026, Messi coming here, it's been
Yeah.
a huge boom here in this country. So it's been exciting to cover the sport over the last few years here from the U.S., both from a U.S. perspective and from a global perspective.
Right.
Actually,
Yeah.
before sorry,
Sorry.
Toipan, I have to
No, no,
interrupt you here
go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
because very interesting point Kyle made about Lionel Messi coming into the US of
Yeah.
A. And
Same
I
thing.
think that has created one hell of a revolution in the country and, sent sparks down the footballing world. How much of an impact do you think that has had on the US MNT? And do you think that it's like just the commercialization of the game, or do you feel that even at the grassroots level, it's going to make a difference in the footballing culture in the USA?
Yeah, I think it's been a positive, obviously. I think if there's any effects on the US national team, that would be seen further down the road because,
Yeah.
if you're getting more people involved in the sport, that kind of a thing, maybe you'll see an uptick in youth soccer. Maybe eventually that will have a knock-on effect for the national team. I think the more immediate effects are the commercialization of the sport, and it's been tough. I think a lot of MLS fans who have already been here for a while are a little bit perturbed with how things have progressed because MLS has really gone all in on Messi, which, I mean, you understand why they would do that, but it's had some consequences. So you look at, for example, Inter Miami doubled their season ticket prices for
Yeah.
the coming season, and they sold out in hours. The effects of that are many of the club's brand new, right? They just started in 2020, but you've still got a supporter base of fans who have been here since 2020. Most of them are probably priced out of renewing their season tickets, which means the supporter base for most Inter Miami games is going to be brand new this year.
Yeah,
So there are things like that the league hasn't really figured out. The other thing is they're going all in on the Leagues Cup, which is the new competition between MLS and the Mexican League soccer teams, which Inter Miami won last year with Messi. They're going all in on that. They pulled all MLS clubs from the U.S. Open Cup, which is on a base level the US version of the FA Cup, right? It's like if the Premier League pulled all their Premier League teams from the FA Cup and they were like, we're not, or the league, right? The EFL Cup. And they were like, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to go in on something new instead. So there's been a lot of weird consequences from it, but the main boost is really fun.
Yeah, before we go through, I'm just amazed by that background. So I am going to ask you to probably quickly take us through the big parts, the main segments, because I know there's a lot there. I see a Leverkusen scarf. You mentioned a Fulham jersey. There's a Charlotte scarf as well. Because I honestly believe that I am a strong believer in bringing stuff home from all your sporting escapades around the world, and I have turned into a bit of a magnet collector, and which my fridge is almost full of magnets. And I have also now slowly developed this habit of building taking scars from different places. So Kyle, if you don't mind, can you just quickly take through whatever you have in your background and probably share some relevant stories as well, because I'm sure there would be many.
Yeah, how long do we have? I'll try to be brief. But starting from this side, I'm a Syracuse graduate, so there's my lamp. They won the NCAA national championship last year, so
Yeah, which is
big
big,
for
right?
big for Syracuse men's soccer to win their first college title. I went to a PSG match. It was actually, I didn't know this at the time, but it was Lionel Messi's last home match for PSG. So that was cool. I saw, just mentioned the Leagues Cup. I was
Yes.
at
Yeah.
the Leagues Cup final that Inter Miami won. So got a Leagues Cup scarf. You can't quite see it here in the screen, but I collect all of my media passes. So I've got a
Yeah,
big collection of
that's so
those.
good.
I'm based in North Carolina, so
Yes.
hence the Charlotte FC scarf here. And then I do a lot of U.S. national team work, so I've got the U.S. MNT scarf here as well. The Messi flag behind me is from Messi's Inter Miami debut when I
Okay.
was at
Oh,
Drive
wow.
Pink Stadium. You mentioned the Bayer Leverkusen scarf above me. I just recently did a trip to Germany covering Bayer Leverkusen. They are the last team in the Big Five European leagues to have not lost a single game this year. And Xabi Alonso is in the running for the Real Madrid coach when Carlo Ancelotti leaves for Brazil in the summer. So big story there. Big tactical revolution in the Bundesliga. He's really done some wild things. So I wrote some things about that. If you'd like to check it out on sportingnews.com, we have some Xabi Alonso tactical breakdowns there and what Bayer Leverkusen are doing. Behind me, briefly, I've got some other knickknacks here. This is Tim Weah's boot with
Oh,
New
yeah.
Balance, which is cool because he's from New York City, so it has a map of Queens, where he's from in New York City, on the bottom of the boot,
Oh,
which
how
is
cool
pretty
is that?
cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm from Connecticut, which is right outside New York City, so I'm sort of involved in that from a personal perspective. And then a couple other things. We've got a beer can here because this is the official beer of the American Outlaws, which is the supporter group, the official supporter group of the U.S. national team. So they
Okay.
did some things for like that. I do TV broadcasts for Wake Forest, which is another NCAA team here in North Carolina. So I've got some Wake Forest stuff. In fact, I'm wearing a Wake Forest shirt right now. And then some other sports that I am just either a fan of or have done coverage for. I'm a big Giants fan, so I've got New York Giants stuff here. Football is signed by a number of old Giants players that I grew up watching. And then above me, you can only see a bit of it, but there's a Damian Duff jersey
Yeah.
from when I went to Craven Cottage a number of years ago. Saw them. They lost to Arsenal 3-0 in the pouring rain. And so this was his jersey from that game. It still has like the mud marks from the game because I figured that it was a bit authentic. Olivier Giroud scored in that game, and I remember it because I was in the Fulham end behind the goal, and he scored in the first half, so it was in front of us, and it was in the pouring rain, and you'll know Arsenal is famous for its Puma kits that are like skin tight. Those things are
Yeah.
like suction cups. And so his jersey in the pouring rain was like suction to his very defined six pack when he did his knee slide. So I remember that from that game. But yeah, just a quick roundup. Oh, and then this is a program from Chelsea, Real Madrid in the Champions League last year at Stamford Bridge.
Interesting. Wow. That is
Yeah, I just a couple of things that come to my mind after all of that you shared with us. You mentioned the NCAA, and outside USA, everyone keeps talking about it, and I think with a bit of envy as well, because no one has quite cracked the college sports like USA has done. So, the National Collegiate Athletic Association, which is the NCAA, why do you think it has been such a success in the USA, and all the other parts of the world are just catching up and probably would take another half a decade to reach where the NCAA is
absolutely,
right now?
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
interesting because NCAA football, right? American football
Yeah,
is huge. It's almost on the level of the NFL.
yeah,
The other and basketball too is huge in the NCAA.
yeah,
Everything else is still lagging behind a little bit. NCAA soccer is a really interesting space. It's really fun. It's growing in quality. You've got a couple of programs that have been good for years that are struggling to win games now because there's so much talent in NCAA soccer, but it still isn't the talent developmental league that they want it to be, right? Club academies still dwarf collegiate soccer in terms of developing top talent
yeah,
for MLS clubs. So they're still struggling to figure that out, but it is growing in popularity significantly. I covered both the women's and the men's final this year, and they performed those blogs and our coverage did very well. So I'm really happy to see the following that NCAA soccer is getting both domestically and abroad, but they are still working on how do we develop, because the idea of developing talent, right? You want players to start showing their abilities nowadays around like 18, 19 years old, right? That's
yeah,
when you want young players to become viable for the professional level and getting bought by big European clubs. That's about the age
yeah,
that you need players to be developed. Collegiate soccer is from 18 to 21 or 22. So they're
yeah.
late developing, and it's hard to then translate that to the professional ranks. So they're still working on how to make that competing with club academies, but it's been fun to watch the growth.
Yeah, that's interesting because everyone here in India, now with the entire sporting scenario, experience a bit of a shift with people realizing there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of potential in not just cricket, which we also might talk about a bit later on, but also in different sports. I can't help but ask you a bit more about Fulham, which is a club that we recently visited, and then of course Anukar sir can ask one of his Liverpool questions related to Fulham. Kyle, I mean, tell us more about your Fulham fandom and probably a bit more that everyone loves Premier League clubs so much. And only recently, because in India, let's be honest, outside the top six, we don't get too many fans, outside the Manchester Cities, Uniteds, Liverpools, of course, Chelsea's, and we don't even have a lot of Tottenham Hotspur fans, even though the landscape is changing now. But tell us your story behind Fulham and your admiration for them.
Yeah, so my background with soccer or with football is interesting because a lot of times you talk to journalists or people who cover the league or have been around leagues for a long time or the sport, and they have some heartfelt origin story. Right when I was 5 years old, my parents took me to blah blah blah. It's not really the case with me. I grew up an American football and baseball fan.
Yeah,
And so I grew up a New York Giants, New York Yankees fan as a kid. And I didn't get into soccer until much later. When I was in college, my roommates were both Arsenal fans, and they said, "We got to get you a team, a Premier League team." So that was right about when Clint Dempsey was at Fulham. And it was the year after Fulham made their run in the Europa League. And of course, Clint Dempsey scored his unbelievable goal in the comeback against Juventus, which is one of the more famous comebacks in European soccer history. They came back from losing the first leg at Juventus 4-1, won the second leg at home 4-0,
Right.
capped by an obscene Clint Dempsey goal that everyone should go on YouTube and watch if you haven't seen it. So that was really where I started watching the club. I dove in head first. It's also where I started covering the sport. I started a blog. And then I just got lucky enough that NBC Soccer here in the United States got the rights to the Premier League a year or two later, and they needed writers. So that was sort of where I began. And so Fulham is very close to my heart because it's really where I started my career. I've grown a love for the club and the people around it. It really is a family-friendly club. The atmosphere at Craven Cottage is wonderful. They expect a lot, but are also happy with what they have. So I don't think many clubs get both of those things. And of course, they have an American connection with the owner too. So the owner, Shad Khan, is also the owner of the NFL team, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and his son, Tony Khan, has a significant role in the club as well. So, that's been some ups and downs for that family in its Fulham ownership, but it's been fun for me personally to have that connection with the club.
That's very interesting sort of a tale because I mean Fulham, although they haven't really won a major trophy, they've had those moments in which they have had their names etched in the history of football. So if I had to ask you to pick out one Clint Dempsey goal, would it be the one against Juventus or would it be the one which helped them stay in the Premier League against Liverpool on final match day in 2006-7 season?
Yes,
Which
of
one would you
course.
pick?
I'm sure you remember that one well. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that goal against Liverpool in the league was obviously a huge moment in the club, but I think it has to be the goal against Juventus. Not only was it just technically an outrageous goal, he had his back to goal, standing basically on the top right corner of the penalty area, and did like a 180 spin and chipped the
Yeah,
goalkeeper into the far corner. It's an unbelievable goal from a technical standpoint, but also I think, a moment like that on the European stage against a big five club like Juventus was just something that it's such a high, right? Avoiding
yeah,
relegation is a great moment that the club will remember and was obviously important in developing the club further into establishing themselves long term in the Premier League.
Yeah.
But such a high like that against a European club. I'm sure you talk to West Ham supporters and they narrowly avoided relegation a couple times over the last decade or so. But if you ask them, winning the Europa Conference League is probably just such a high for a club like that I think
yeah.
that's the most memorable moment, I would say.
Fair enough. Because like I was very fascinated when you mentioned Clint Dempsey there, because as a player, I
Sorry,
mean
guys.
he had
Before we just proceed, I just wanted to share that when I had gone to West Ham, their home game, which was 2 months ago, I had bought a West Ham Europa Conference League scarf from that side.
uh,
There you
like
go.
That's special for me. Yeah, I just thought I should share that. Oh, I mean, it is this side. Yeah. So when we
yeah,
had so when we had gone to the match, it was West Ham versus Sheffield, and it was right. It was one match after Sheffield got thrashed 8-0 against Newcastle, and the West Ham fans
yeah.
were just buzzing. So yeah, I wanted to do a bit of a show off. Sorry, guys, you can continue, Anukash.
That's an interesting anecdote here there. So yeah, Kyle, when Clint Dempsey, there was this summer when he was about to leave for either Tottenham or Liverpool, and there was an option that he might go to Liverpool and Jordan Henderson might come the other way. Do you think if at that point of time when Clint Dempsey was kind of done with his prime, past his prime, or like had just 1 or 2 good years left, do you think Jordan Henderson coming to the club would have made a difference at Fulham at that point of time? Or do you think at Tottenham in itself was the right move for him?
I honestly don't remember Jordan Henderson being linked. I think player swaps like that are so rare that they hardly ever come
Yeah,
to fruition. If you see rumors of a player swap, you can pretty much consider that not likely to happen. If anything, nowadays, player swaps happen as separate transactions, right? So they may be related, but they're done as separate transactions. So I think probably wasn't terribly likely to happen in the first place. I think a player like Jordan Henderson would have been amazing for a club like Fulham. I think, especially at that time when he was really in his prime. But I'm not so sure that Clint. I think anytime you get a chance to move to a bigger club like that, you do it. I don't think you can knock a player for making a step up. And there's no question that a step to either Liverpool or Tottenham was a clear step up from Fulham. I think players only have a limited time in their career. And I think a player would tell you 10 times out of 10, I would rather test myself at the big club and fail than not have done it at all.
Yeah.
Now, occasionally you get players who don't and have legendary careers at one club, and that's wonderful to see. And I don't think that's a problem or a bad thing either. But I don't think it's right to knock a player for making that step up, whether it works out or not. It didn't work out for Clint. I don't really think it would have worked at Liverpool either. I think he probably was a better fit for Liverpool than for Tottenham, but I just think he was perfect for Fulham. He had that edge to him, I think, that
Yeah.
fit well at the club. He was versatile, which is important for a club like Fulham, but doesn't quite work at a bigger club. I think at a bigger club, versatility sometimes can hurt you, whereas at a smaller club, when you're more important, it can help you because a manager has more ways of keeping you in the lineup. At a bigger club, there you can get a lack of consistency, which he had. But I think overall, it was the right move for him to go to Tottenham if it was the right move for him personally, and it just didn't work out.
Makes sense.
One of the things that I wanted to also discuss a bit before we move on to other topics is you mentioned Shahid Khan. So Kyle, when we were at the Craven Cottage, so I was there as part of my master's college group. So it was in affiliation with my college, Global Institute of Sports Business. So we had the commercial heads, we had the operational head, person, ops head, stadium ops head, who was kind enough to help us go through an entire stadium tour. And at the end of it all, we had gone to the Fulham Pier. Have you heard about it, Kyle?
Yes, yeah, right on the water there on the Thames.
Yes, exactly. So now, just for context for everyone, and also Anukar sir, it's that now when Shahid Khan, the owner of Fulham, came to bought the entire club, and some of the stats pointed towards Fulham having 90% of the revenue during match days through broadcast, through ticket sales, to other stuff. But Fulham as a locality in London is one of the most affluent localities, and so Shahid Khan understood that there was a lot of commercial value in building a premium offering that gives people the chance to come and have a great time, and in turn also probably interact a bit with the football club during the match days, non-match days, whatever. And this entire project is still in its pilot stages, sorry, but it is interesting. So Kyle, do you think projects like this would only work in the developed football markets in England and USA and struggle a bit outside whatever the first world countries, or do you feel it has more to do with a country's affinity towards the sport more than their economic development? I know suddenly we went from discussing Fulham and our fandoms to a serious business question, but I can't help but think about these things as well.
No, it's a good segue. I think that's a difficult question to answer, first of all, because I think there are multiple right answers and there's really very few wrong answers. I think the balance you need to strike is offering premium options because high value investors are really important nowadays.
Yeah.
And from a marketing perspective, from a revenue perspective, those I don't want to call them customers, but those connections and relationships are very important.
Yes.
You also don't want to lose connection to your supporter base.
Yeah.
I think the Cons, one of the things that they've done well is to strike that balance. I think a lot of fans at Fulham on a base level, the everyday fans, the blue collar fans, would tell you that they're struggling a little bit connecting back to that fan base, only because prices have significantly increased
Yeah.
for tickets over the last 5 or 6 years. And I think that has angered some of the fans. Now, some of that is just because that's just the way that the sport is going. That is the way many economies are going. Inflation is running rampant in countries around the world. That's just the way it is. It's not really their fault. Some of it maybe could be down to the owners. It's hard to know, but they've done overall a good job striking that balance. In other countries, that balance is even more important because revenue streams are lower. Um, Ticket prices are lower, and the fan bases are more sensitive even to changes in that regard. But premium investors are also more important because revenue is hard to come by. So having connections and relationships like that is important. So I think that's where Inter Miami is starting to go lose
Yeah.
a little bit, because you lose that connection to the supporter base. I understand they want to take the opportunity to capitalize on Lionel Messi and the marketing opportunity that he brings. Doubling the price of season tickets is not the way to go about that. There are so many other opportunities to take advantage of Messi's influence and growth and revenue streams, that ticket sales is really not the place to gouge people. You are risking really throwing your fan base for a loop, and that's what they've done. And I think that match day atmosphere is so important, especially in a country like the United States, where soccer is still growing at a rapid rate, that the supporter groups are so vital to the clubs and the league's sustainability. I think that balance is maybe being lost a little bit at Inter Miami.
Yeah,
That's true.
that yeah, that is quite an insight, yeah, Anukas sir. For people like us in I mean, not exactly people like us, maybe people like us in 10 years who are really trying to understand what kind of economic business models would work in India. Whereas I just love how Kyle began this answer, because he mentioned there are a lot of right answers and very little wrong answers, because every
Yeah.
market is different. And even in our history of 2 years of working this podcast, Anukar sir, you might recall many instances where we just develop different ways of doing things, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, honestly, what I really liked about it, because what about what Kyle said was, because what we have seen is that in a country like India, it's
Yeah,
what we see from the outside is Messi having influence on Inter Miami, and how much the footballing culture in the US is growing. But when you like, what you have given us is an insight in of what is happening in the fan base of Inter
yeah,
Miami, which we were not really aware of, I think, before this episode. And that's pretty interesting, because I think Al Nassr, for that matter, have done really well when it comes to capturing that Ronaldo fan base. Then Inter Miami have done with the say Messi, for that matter, because a lot of players have gone in the Saudi Pro League, and I'm sure even they would have come in the MLS if there was a better working model, for that matter. So I think
yeah.
these are some factors of how the commercialization of the game is different in these two countries.
Yeah.
But Kyle, yeah, yeah,
Let me chime in one more too, because I want to make it clear too. Every market is vastly different, right? So
Yeah.
what
yeah,
might be right for one market might not be right for another. The two examples I could think of are one that you just mentioned, which is the Saudi Pro League. It can look there are many issues with the approach that the Saudi league has taken,
Yeah.
and that's for another day. But what I've been impressed by is, even with the spending that has gone on, which you look at it and you go, this is for a global market. They are targeting a global market maybe at the expense of the local market. But then you look at the match day atmosphere for these games and you're like, whoa, the local market is all in on this too. So they have done a great job of leveraging their financial power to benefit both their global reach and their local reach. Now, that has come at a cost that, again, we can talk about on another day, because there are many humanitarian issues and other problems that come with the way the Saudi league has approached sports in general. But from the aspect that we are discussing, I've been impressed by how their approach has benefited both a global outreach and a local outreach. The other one, a great example of how markets are different, Germany. Match day prices in Germany are lower by a vast margin than any other country because of
Yeah.
their 50+1 ownership model, which
Yeah.
has really made a focus and a point of keeping match day prices low. They have said, we're going to target our revenue streams outside of match day revenue to keep our local markets more important than any other league. It has
Yeah.
come at a sacrifice of their global marketing capabilities. They lag behind a little bit in the Bundesliga in their global marketing. Everybody is dwarfed by the Premier League, but they are dwarfed by the Premier League and probably by La Liga too. They're probably on a global outreach level at about Serie A.
Yeah.
So, but they have said this is more important to us. And so that local market is really sensitive to price changes. So that's an example of where what a model in one league might not work in another, right? What you might do in the Premier League with prices, you might say, hey, we're going to up match day prices at the expense of our local market. It is what it is for our global outreach. And the Premier League is wealthier because of it. That would not work in the Bundesliga.
Can you elaborate on the 50+1 model for our listeners?
Yeah, so the 50+1 model in Germany, I'm not an expert on it, but from what I understand, private equity companies are capped at a 49% ownership stake in a club. So it
Okay.
is fan ownership at least
Mm.
50+1%. Basically meaning all clubs in Germany must be fan owned by a majority. So
Yeah.
that is supporter based ownership in Germany, and private equity companies can only have a maximum of a 49% ownership stake in clubs. So that has basically prioritized fan importance and supporter importance in the fabric of the clubs, which is why ticket prices are so low.
Yeah. Now that we have had a basic understanding on these aspects of how different international markets have, adopted different approaches, techniques. Kyle, what I'd want you to also probably ask, since you are at a pretty prominent position when it comes to football content, journalism, basically, and I'll just again ease into this topic. What's one good thing that you like about your job, and one thing that you don't like so much about your job?
I mean, I have a great job. I can't I can't find much to complain about. What's there not to like? First of all, I mean, I from an oversimplified point, I get to watch football and get paid for it. Like
Yeah.
I don't know too many things wrong with that. It's a great gig. I would say it's very difficult to break into. It is a very difficult business to find job security and stability, only because in today's economy, the sports journalism in general is a rapidly fluctuating market that is struggling to find consistent revenue streams.
Yeah.
Advertising is really difficult because companies have really found it tough to monetize the internet because people inherently won't pay for something that was previously free. So the internet is inherently free aside from having to pay for your internet connection, right? Like it is really tough to get people to subscribe to
Yeah.
content. Even if the content is great, you look at a publication like The Athletic, which is mostly
Yeah.
US based, but is expanding globally.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
they have amassed a huge quantity of some of the best journalists in the world. You make a list of some of the best journalists across sports in the world, especially here in the US. Most of them work for The Athletic, and they have still financially struggled to stay afloat. They were nearly bankrupt at one point. They were purchased by the New York Times, which has been a whole thing, because people don't want to pay for content. People have proven that they would prefer lower quality content for free over higher quality content than they want to pay for. So monetizing the internet has been really difficult. I would say that's the hardest thing about this job is it's hard to break into, and there's not a lot of job security because the financial world in this business is changing rapidly. I began my career in broadcast, so I was a part-time writer for a long time. I really wanted to have a career in play-by-play broadcasting, so I really was. I worked for a long time for a college sports radio broadcast company here in the U.S., doing mostly American football and basketball in the NCAA. That was really the place that was my first love. My happy place is sitting in a broadcast booth with a microphone in front of me, calling a game. It didn't work out largely because of the factors I explained to you before. It's a very difficult business to break into.
Yeah.
For every one person that hits gold on their dream, there's 100 people who didn't make it, and I'm one of those 100. So, but I writing is my 1B to the 1A, and I love it. It's a great job to be able to cover the sport that I love, and I am blessed. I want to say a big thanks to Sporting News because I was out of sports entirely when COVID hit. So when sports shut down during the COVID-19 pandemic, I was out of a job, and I was out of a job for about a year and a half, and really struggled to get back. I didn't think I was going to get back into sports at all. So Sporting News took a chance on me, allowed me to continue to do what I love, and I've been really happy there since. So that's the pluses and minuses. If you go into this business, go in with caution because it's, you're not going to make millions, and the job security isn't what you could find in other careers, but you will be doing what you love every day, and that is worth a whole lot.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a
Yes.
very interesting narrative, Dwaipayan, isn't it? Because
Of course.
interestingly, a couple of episodes back, we had James Pierce from the Athletic. He is the correspondent for Liverpool FC, and so like I'll give you a very interesting personal insight from my side into the Athletic because like when it came in, it had some like even now they keep on putting out some very interesting articles, some really tactically good stuff. Even in fact, they keep on every now and then bringing out those free articles. Like you must have heard of Emiliano Sala, one of the players who was about to get transferred into Cardiff, and his plane crashed midway.
Oh,
So
yes.
yeah, so Athletic deliver some really good content, and I have seen that recently they have been trying to cut their prices down to $1 a month or even lesser. And when you see the quality of content, like honestly, they should be getting much more than what the Times, for that matter, are getting. But at the end of the day, that what happens on Twitter and all is that whatever content any top journalist puts out, it gets put out by a lot of so-called aggregator accounts, because for an aggregator account you just need one account to kind of take a subscription and put out all the information. And unfortunately social media doesn't really have a lot of filters in not being able to put out that premium content or stopping it from coming out. So I think that way journalism really takes a hit. Do you think there's a way through which uh, the customers as well as these companies can reach a middle ground? Because at the end of the day, some of the content, it requires a lot of money in terms of how it's going to be, how it's going to come out, the resources involved. So do you think there's some middle ground which can be reached in such a scenario?
I think if there is one, nobody's found it yet. I
Yeah.
think in my mind, I think there are a lot of people who would disagree with me, probably most of them at the Athletic, but in my mind, the subscription-based model is not sustainable.
Yeah.
Um, it will work for streaming services, right? Television content. People will pay for a wealth of television content, and there are some other avenues where subscription-based models will work. I don't think written publications can survive on a subscription-based model. That is my own personal opinion. I'm happy to be proven wrong. I would love to see somebody figure out a way to monetize the internet in a subscription-based model. But if the Athletic is struggling to make it work with, like you mentioned, I mean, some of the highest quality content out there. They
Absolutely.
have breaking news, they have tactical breakdowns, they have local coverage for team specific coverage for a lot of clubs. If they can't make it work, I don't know how it's possible.
Absolutely.
But another thing that I think throughout our 12 months program that I did in Mumbai regarding sports and the commercialization of sports, and also Kyle, if you speak to Pete, Nick, and all of us had long prolonged conversations around this same aspect. So we did research for many different sports companies, including the sporting news, to understand how we can probably commercialize sports content. And just as Kyle pointed out, subscriptions is does not right now seem to be the answer. There are a couple of interesting insights that we got throughout our extensive research around trying to understand what are the ways that fans can pay sports right holders like Sporting News and others. First of all, they said track our time in your platform, probably gamify it, and then give access to your premium offerings. So that is
Okay.
something that the Indian fans, so all of our research, Kyle, was specific to the Indian market, and we'll also ask you something around whatever you have gathered knowledge around India, Indian football, and Indian sports. India is a very price sensitive country. All the other countries are as well, but India is definitely hugely driven by value consciousness. And as you said, and as you rightly pointed out, they would rather have not so great work for free rather than great work at a paid version. So I feel, but the I would say the future is bright, because the young children, I mean young children as in the upcoming population, they want to probably spend a bit in sports to get an experience that would probably bring them closer to the sport that they love, the team that they love, the player that they love. And that is also how, people, I mean, me and Anukash also keep talking about trying to understand different revenue streams for us in the long term. We don't really know that when would we crack the code, but the entire journey and the entire process of trying to understand how a particular fan behaves, or how a particular what are the certain positive trigger points of fans, is something I would say, Anukash sir, is a gratifying experience, because it's just knowing more about your potential customer base in this business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Is that a question to me, right?
Yes, Anukash sir.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, with everything that comes in sport, I think sport teaches you so much for that matter. Even may it be the sports business for that matter, or may it be sports for that matter. And Kyle, I'll say one thing that which me and Doipan both love about the podcast is that every person, may he or she be working with us, or if may he or she be coming as a guest, we have learned a lesson every time someone has come on the Indie Football podcast. But I have a question for me. Like, since you have been to so many countries, covered so many games, covered so many sports, what is one common theme which you think drives the very core of the sport, which you have found across all domains, across all platforms, which make you go to sleep with a smile at the end of the day, knowing that that is something which keeps you going.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a great question. I think
Kyle, you can probably answer in 4 to 5 business days, by thinking.
yes, yes, for sure. Yeah, do we have a whole nother podcast to spend on that? No,
Of course, you might have.
I think the biggest thing across all sports and all fan bases in my mind that keeps people coming back is hope.
Yeah.
Um, to just watch like young kids or the oldest fans come back when they think there's a famous moment from a movie here in the US where Jim Carrey plays a character where he goes, "So you're telling me there's a chance, right?" When
Yeah,
he
yeah.
got he's like, "I wouldn't." There's 99.9%. He goes, "So you're telling me there's a chance? As long as there's a chance, people will come back for whatever they're looking for. A
Yeah.
chance to see their favorite player, a chance to win a championship, a chance to win a game, a chance to score a point, whatever you are driven by. Hope of that thing you are driven by is existing, then that is the best part of the sport because fans will come back, fans will get excited, and fans will buy in.
Yeah.
They always say it's the hope that kills you, right? That's
Yeah.
the saying here as well, and it's so true because you get your expectations and your hopes built up only to be crushed, but the opportunity to be crushed a little bit is what we love about sports, right? You wouldn't be a
Mm.
fan if you didn't have that vulnerability, right? So I think that's what people come back for. That's what I come back for because even as a neutral, and we'll go back to the very beginning. We'll go full circle here. We talked about how I'm a Fulham supporter. I think a lot of fans don't understand that journalists are very capable of having a club that they support and also being impartial, right? Like if
Yeah.
I'm writing about Fulham, I'm capable of doing my job, even if I'm supporting that club because I'm allowed to be a person, right? Like we're journalists, but we're people too. We're allowed to have clubs that we support, but at the same time, we understand that there needs to be a barrier between the support and the journalism. So
Yeah.
Absolutely.
don't get on a journalism if you're out there. Don't get on a journalist for the club that he supports because or he or she supports because that's an important part to them too. But I think even as a neutral, coming back to watch people have hope in a game, in a match, in a player, in a competition is my favorite part about it. Because at the end, whether the hope is rewarded or crushed, the opportunity to be rewarded or crushed for your hope is the best part of sports.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
I think that's beautifully summarized. Kyle, before we let you go, we can't help but we always try to push this in every episode, no matter where our guests from. How much do you know about Indian sports, Indian football, the Indian Super League? How much are you influenced, and how much? And you can be honest if you say I don't see Indian football going anywhere, which is the opinion for half of the
Yeah,
Indian here in
we'll cut that part out if that happens. Just kidding.
yeah,
The look, I will say the football world is so vast. It is
yeah,
impossible for me to know, for one person to know everything. In fact, I've been overwhelmed just in the last 2 years covering the amount of leagues that I do. The Big Five European leagues, the Europa League, the Europa Conference League, the MLS, the Copa Libertadores, Brazilian Serie A. I mean, it's just so many.
I just I was
It's
just hoping you
impossible.
would say the Indian Super League at the end of it, but that
I
never.
don't know enough about the
Yeah,
Indian League
yeah,
to have an opinion on whether it's viable or not. But I will say that I am very impressed. My only connection with Indian sports would be cricket. I spent 6 months in Australia,
yeah.
freshly out of college, and I got really into cricket when I was there. So I have watched the IPL on occasion, and obviously the Indian national team. In fact, the only one of the only two cricket matches that I have attended in person was Australia versus India test match back in 2011 in Australia, in
Uh,
Perth.
yeah, the
Okay.
part I think it was when Virat Kohli scored his first century.
I It might be. I
Yeah,
all I remember from that because it was so long ago was that India got waxed because it was
yeah,
over in 3 days. It was over by
I think
lunch on the
it
third
was
day. What's that?
Indian India lost 4-0, isn't it? That series,
yes,
if
I
I'm not
India
think
wrong.
lost
so.
4-0. India.
And the final test was in Perth, and it was over just after lunch on the third day. And I remember Ben Hilfenhaus almost had a hat trick towards the end of it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I that's my only real connection to Indian sports is cricket. I have watched the IPL on occasion, but I'm impressed by the fan culture there in the IPL. It's just, I mean, I would love to go to an IPL match because it seems like a bonkers atmosphere. But I do not have a ton of familiarity with the soccer league there.
Well,
Uh,
the IPL, I think
IPL.
it itself does love Australian players because I think today Mitchell, of course, Dwaipayan might know more about it. Today, Mitchell Stark got sold for 24.5 crores, which is, I think, close to 4 million US dollar,
Yeah,
somewhere around that,
around that.
3.5 million, 3.5
Best,
million US dollars.
best luck to all the best to Mitchell Stark trying converting all those big bucks. But that's huge. But that's huge, really. IPL has got immense money, but as people in football in India, we can only hope that that kind of insane money at some point of time translates into football.
Well, yeah. I would caution a little bit because what I've learned covering the Saudi league over the last couple of
Yeah,
years is that, and I'm conscious of time here. I don't want to get too in the weeds, but it is important to remember IPL has huge money. The Premier League has huge money, but we are conditioned as people to understand that when it comes to money, even the richest people in the world have some kind of ceiling, right?
yeah,
That is just how money works.
yeah,
When it comes to the Saudi league, we have to condition ourselves to understand that there is no ceiling. And when you look at it like that, everything starts to make a lot more sense.
yeah.
There is reasons why they're spending this amount of money on sports in general. It has nothing to do with an investment. They are not looking to make their money back. Um, but when we understand that the Saudi league and the Saudi sports approach in general is special because there is no ceiling to what they can do, it's a little scary, but it is also makes a little more sense.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kyle. It's been an insightful, entertaining, educative, informative, all kinds of adjectives that we kind of hope for each episode to be. I all of both of us know you are running a tight schedule, so we deeply appreciate the time that you have taken out. And if you think this is the last of us talking about sports, football, you are absolutely mistaken. We would probably keep the WhatsApp group active, and we keep doing lots in terms of YouTube lives, Instagram lives, and probably we would have you around. Anukar sir, quite the value add in terms of a global perspective. I think just one look into into Kyle Bond's frame, and then you would know that he has been around the world, right?
I hope for much more, yes, but that is accurate, and I love it. I love it, and that's why I said before, like it's overwhelming. You can't keep track of everything. It is much better from a career perspective to sort of pigeonhole yourself a little bit and become an expert in one thing. But I find that difficult because I really enjoy the culture. I really enjoy the global nature of this sport. And I can't get enough of it. So thank you guys for having me and asking me to come on. I really enjoy it. If anybody wants to find my social, it's at _bonfire with two N's, my last name, BONN, on both Twitter, well, I guess X now, and Instagram. And please do follow all our content at Sporting News because myself, but also our excellent team of global writers from Australia, from the UK, from the US. We've figured out a great way to cover this sport and many other sports. So please
Yeah.
do jump in. We're doing our best, and hopefully we can serve all the fans.
Thank you so
Anukar,
much, Kyle. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I'm so sorry.
Anukar sir,
Thank you so much.
I will just say you would have liked it more had you seen a Liverpool scarf in Kyle's frame, right?
Well, I would have, but I think I am very impressed by how about his knowledge for the game, and how much I think we also learned in this episode because before this I knew that you had been heading the soccer division at TSN, but I did not know about your history as a fan and how you have made it in sport, and
Exactly.
also what really stuck by me was your story and how you came back in the sport as serendipity when TSN came in and how it all changed for you. So that's really inspirational, man. And I won't be surprised if I get in a vocal fight with my friendly vocal fight with my co-host to ask him to name this episode as Bonn to impress, because that's how impressed I am by you. So
That's
thank you so much,
that's
man.
great.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you both. Thank you, Kyle. Good
Yeah,
night, guys.
thank you, guys.
Thank
Good night.